All guests on ZASLOW Show 2.0 brought to us by the official beer of the program. You know I'm talking about Johnny Cuba, most delicioso, European roots with that Caribbean soul, a refreshing German lager in a can. You can go to johnnycuba.us. You can find the nearest location to you. Make sure you always drink responsibly, and don't forget Johnny Cuba's mantra, stay tranquilo. Oh, look at this very special guest we have here today on the program, Randy Scott, SportsCenter, Disney Plus, with Gary Striewski, big stars now. Randy, good to see you. How are you?
I'm good, man. Not big stars by any means. Just double the shows. That's all. We're just doing twice as many shows. That's all it is.
Okay, so I want to hear about this came up recently actually on when I was in with Levitard a few days ago. And yeah. I hope it doesn't make you feel weird when I describe it. As I said, I go, they're like the new Big Show. I mean, it was very long time ago. Dan Patrick, Keith Olbermann, and yeah, I feel like Randy Scott and Gary Striewski. It's like the new version of today's Big Show.
Dude, that made us so happy. Like as not even in an egotistical way, just as nerds, like as like fans who grew up, like that's who we watched, that's who we idolized. And like, Keith's kind of gone on and done his own thing since then, and in a different way. But like, if you just crystallize those years together and what they did to, inspire like a generation of people who maybe didn't go through Bristol but are in sports media because of it, like that's the highest of praise. And that's also like, I don't know, that's kind of what we have always wanted to, Gary and I have always wanted to like be for whoever's watching the show now. Like we want them to say like, oh yeah, like our Dan and Keith, even if they don't necessarily know who Dan and Keith are or were, like we want them to be like, to just identify us with SportsCenter and with the SportsCenter that they watch. And so I think for our audience on the 7 a.m., especially on the 7 a.m., like during football season, that was before College Game Day and before NFL Countdown, they, are home from school or home like before games or practices of their own. And like, just, anecdotally, the number of times that we'll be out somewhere and someone's like, oh, my kid and we watch you guys before he gets on the bus. Or, I make sure I watch you guys before I headed out to whatever class I had at NC State, like these, it's really kind of, I don't know. It kind of is a very nerdy, satisfying thing to think that maybe some people might associate us that way with their own like sports TV memories. And those guys are the standard. They just are. They were stars, sure, but they were also like they just didn't make mistakes. They were so good. They're still so good. Dan's a legend in sports. Keith, as I said, is a legend in his own way and doing whatever he's doing. But like, it's just the highest of praise, dude. Like we were so tickled to see that. And Gary was like, "Do you know this guy?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've worked with Zaz before." But seeing you with Levitard, like I was unfamiliar with the history that you guys have, so that was kind of cool to see, because how Dan and I met was Dan, I thought, hated me, like Why? Literally hated me. Well, there was when he so Dan at ESPN used to have these weekly segments on SportsCenter AM when that show started in 2016. And I think the hits started later in the year, and it was admittedly a crowded show, like I've been on the 7 a.m. show since, not when it launched. I kind of came on as like, I don't know, as the tournament got going that year, NCAA tournament actually. So right about now, but Dan identified the fact that it was, Kevin Nagandi and Jay Harris and Jamie Sire and Serena Morales, and then me as like, maybe they don't need 5 anchors, and why did they just add this guy? And so he came on wearing a t-shirt once, stone-faced, just deadpan, and the t-shirt, black t-shirt. I think I don't know if his brother, I don't know if Lebo designed it or if it was just a Mike Ryan might have put it together. And it was just a hashtag, I hate Randy Scott. Like big white letters, and that I was like,
he loves you.
Yeah, but I didn't know it at the time. I listened to the show. I got the show, but I didn't know that was how he and his family, his work family, like expressed love. And so every week it would change. It would be I hate Randy Scott. Then it was fire Randy Scott. I hate Randy Scott's
Great.
face. There was one where he called out my mom, and he goes, "I hate Randy Scott's mom, but only for giving birth to Randy Scott." So the hashtags were ridiculous. And so our show was like, "Hey, you got to respond. You got to respond." And I was like, "I'm gonna lose this fight." Like Dan has this whole army, so I got my mom to record a Dan Lebitard looks like video.
Yeah.
So this like montage of things, and it was awesome. And Dan, it was so well received, and it was in the fall of 2016. And then what Dan didn't know at the time was my mom was sick. My mom was fighting cancer and but complications of cancer, ended up passing away in December, and that just solidified. Like, Dan sent flowers, the show group sent food. They've checked in on me every year since then, right around that time. And it just became this, like, once you're in the family, you're in the family thing. And so to see you, like, it shouldn't be, just because it's new to me doesn't make it new. But to see you with that sitting into the show group last week, I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like, Zaz is in the family. You know what I mean? So it felt really cool to see it, because that whole group is always just going to have such a special place in my heart and in my family's heart. My siblings love them.
That is a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I mean, yesterday I had Frank Isola on the show here, and the first thing before we started recording, Frank said, he goes, "Hey, so what's the relationship like with Lebitard?" And Frank knows I'm based here in South Florida, but he doesn't know that I have the relationship with Lebitard because I did, the past week with him. And I like that there are people like you who are seeing that now, where it's like, yeah, Dan's been a close friend of mine for 20 years because we were at 790 The Ticket. We were there at the very start of that little startup radio station, which was a very big deal to us down here at the time. I mean, and I, when people learn where I say, yeah, I started there, I was the producer for Boog Shambi, who is one of my closest friends in the whole world. And people are like, really? It's like, yeah, So I like that I got to sit in with them all these days, and people like you are noticing that, there's a relationship there. It was a lot of fun. We're like, all of us. George Sedano was another one who was there with us, not at the start of the radio station, but in the very early days. Like, he's another. A lot of us came from that radio station and wound up working with ESPN afterward.
It is a hit factory, but to be there at the start of something and bringing it back to the SportsCenter Plus that we're doing on Disney Plus, like being there at the start at the launch is both exhilarating, as it must have been for you and for Dan and for everybody else involved, but it's also like there's also probably a little thing in the back of your mind, a little worry, a little concern, like, oh man, like there's pressure here, like there's a lot riding on this. We got to make sure this thing gets off the ground,
So tell everyone how the new show, it's on Disney Plus, SportsCenter. Randy's got Gary Striewski. Tell everybody how they can catch it. And when did you know that you and Gary got something cooking?
Oh man. Okay. So SportsCenter Plus is live at 9 a.m. Eastern on Disney Plus. It's 15 to 20 minutes. That's what's kind of cool is, it's definitely a crystallized, condensed, play the hits, fast-paced version of the hour show that we do at 7 a.m. Eastern live on ESPN, that you can see on cable and anywhere else that you watch ESPN on Hulu or whatever it is. But SC Plus is the first version of SportsCenter that is streamable and is on demand for 24 hours. If you miss it live at 9 a.m. Eastern, as the numbers are suggesting a lot of people do, but they find it on demand. And what's been really cool to see is the retention rates are through the roof. Like, people will watch, more than half of the audience watches the entire thing, which in our business now, as we're coming to embrace and understand better audience metrics and what's valued in terms of retention and things like that, unheard of. And that's really cool to hold somebody for 15, 20 minutes. People would be doing backflips doing that in a linear cable television capacity. So, but it's been really, there's been some ingenuity here with it that is beyond it, above Gary and I for sure. With our producer, during the week it's Max Barefoot, the brain trust behind it, Mike Foss and Pete McConville and Dave Roberts and Burke Magnus and some of these guys who have been around this business for a long time and now are reimagining it in a different way, are saying, hey, we gotta flip this rundown. Like, let's not save it's almost like every game is a bullpen game. It's like, let's not save our closer for the end. Let's not save top plays for the end. Let's start with top plays. Because if our audience numbers and anecdotally are saying like, hey, I never miss top plays, let's start with that. And then let's not give them an off ramp the entire time. Let's keep the pace, keep it moving. So we're like, hey, start with top plays. Then we've got a user generated top play, a neighborhood submitted top play. Great. Then we're on to the main three, storylines, 3 highlights, 5 highlights before you blink, one into the other. And then you're like, wait a minute, hold on. I've been here for 10 minutes, and then we land the plane and we're off and running. So that part's been really cool. Getting to do it with Gary getting to do this show, be a part of this launch with Gary it's been incredible. We've been doing the show together since 2022.
And did you know him at all before they sat him with you? Hey, today you're hosting with Gary.
The first show we did was in 2019, and that was one of his first. So pre-pandemic, one of his first SportsCenters, not the very first one. I think his first one was with Jay Harris. And I just knew him like he came to ESPN from Nesson in Boston, which has the Red Sox games and the Bruins games. And I came to ESPN from Nesson, but I'm 42, Gary's 38. He came through Nesson well after I was gone. So we never overlapped. We didn't know each other. I'd seen him though. He was doing like sideline for Red Sox games. So I knew who he was. And we have a mutual friend, L. Duncan, who's half of the 6 p.m. SportsCenter. So L told me, hey, ESPN's going to hire this guy, Gary. I think you and him would really get along. And I was like, all right. And then, you see him, and I've told Gary this, you see him and you're like, who's this broy dude from Colorado who's kind of hip hop, kind of not, kind of sports nerd, kind of not, like he's a lot of different things. And I was like, man, I don't know, because I had a great thing with Nicole Briscoe. Nicole Briscoe was my teammate for a good number of years, and still is one of my best friends. And I'm friends with her husband and her kids and I. My kids get along. Like we're great. But when they moved Nicole to nights, Gary just made the most sense. And I remember being like, we'd done enough shows to where like I was nervous because I had this great chemistry with Nicole. But I mean, I don't know, a week's worth of shows, and you're like, oh, we have the same sense of humor. We're like finishing each other's highlight. Like there's a share the ball component to the show, like at least for how I like to do it, where I'm going to give you room to jump in on my highlights. I would love to be able to jump in on yours, but I'm not going to intrude. It's not my highlight.
Great feeling. But when you know that you have that with the host, a great feeling.
Yeah, and that's and we do. And it's not to say that other people who don't, like, Stan Verrett and Linda Cohn, they have that relationship. Stan had it with Neil Everett as well. SVP had it when he was doing shows with Neil Everett and Stewart, God rest his soul, before him. And like, I feel like good pairings kind of check the ego at the door and don't look at each highlight as like, this is mine and what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. Like, and Gary and I had that, I'm telling you, from like the first week, for sure.
What is the most hectic sports center that you hosted? You got the producer in your ear. It's the breaking news. You got to pivot. What is the most hectic sports center you've done?
The Boston Marathon bombing. I was on the desk for that, and I was really, I started in June of 2012, and that was April of 13. So I was in my first year. I was on what we jokingly called at the time, it was actually Tom Waddle who came up with it, who does, ESPN radio in Chicago, former Bears wide receiver. He goes, oh, you do the Friends and Family Sports Center. And I was like, God, damn it, Waddle. Like, cause he's wrong. He's not wrong. It was on ESPN News for 3 hours from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. But the bombing happened at 2:50 in the afternoon. My ex-wife was watching it. She was home on maternity leave with our son. And she was like, something happened at the marathon. And I was like, yeah, we're seeing that there was a manhole cover that exploded. Like, and she goes, no, 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 there's blood everywhere. Like because locally we live in Boston, in the Boston area, and you could see you could watch the marathon. It was on local TV. And so I remember telling our producer at the time, hey, I don't want to read. I've written this on camera because it was Patriots Day. So the Red
Yep.
Sox play at 11 in the morning and we're on at 3 and the game had to be over for us to run the highlights and the game was over. And I was like, I wrote this like, you know, sort of like a try hard on camera where it was like, Boston gets more done before 11 a.m. than most people get done in a day on Patriots Day. Very just would not have fit the tone of how that day was shaping up. And they listened, which in your first year at ESPN to even suggest something like that, I felt kind of out of pocket, but they were very collaborative and they're like, yeah, okay, we're gonna change it. Do the highlight. I was like, I don't even want to do the highlight. And they said, you got to do the highlight, and then we'll figure out what's going on. And so we did the highlight, and then they said, all right, breaking news, and then in your ear, the rest of the couple more hours, they're like, breaking news animation, come on camera, say that there's that there's heavy police presence at the finish line of the Boston Marathon, and we'll have more details when SportsCenter comes back. So you're ad-libbing that. Then you go to break. They tell you everything that's going on during break, what we're comfortable saying, what the AP is confirmed, and all that. And then you're just off and running. And I was doing a show with a guy who's now doing news in Charlotte, and he was from the DC area, but he'd never lived in Boston, and I'd lived downtown. So we started taking these aerial shots, and they were like in my ear. They're like, "Hey, do you know where this is? You know what we're looking at?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's
Yeah, you're gonna
Boylston.
know.
Yeah, it's Boylston looking east, toward the river or toward the bay, the harbor. There's there's that, this building, that building." And they're like, "All right, go." And you're like, "Okay." And yeah, for like 2 hours, it was just in your ear, hectic. And then they're like, all right, you guys can stand down next break because we're bringing in new anchors. And there's a little part of you, I was 30, 31. There's a little part of you that's like, no, this is mine. Like I've been here this whole time. I'm going to do this. And then they go, it's Jeremy Schaap and Bob Lee. And
Oh
you're
yeah,
like,
you step aside.
you're like, okay, cool. This is my stop. The grown-ups are here. And you realize that for as nervous as you've been, there's a real adrenaline letdown coming out because, you have friends running the marathon, you have, that was the most cowardly part. One of the most cowardly parts, excuse me, of that day was those two human stains did that, at a time of the marathon where the charity folks were running, it wasn't the elite runners. It wasn't any of that. These were the people who you like saw at the grocery store and whose kids went to your kid's school and they had not qualified by like time necessarily. They'd raised the money, and that was what was so sad. I remember we had a one woman that we got on the phone who would run, and she was like very emotional on the phone, and you're trying to get information but also like not push her over the edge to like sobbing. And she was at Stephanie's on Newberry, this like popular breakfast and then restaurant place, and I was like, where are you from? And she's like, the Bay Area. She's like, San Francisco. And I was like, okay, have you been able to? She's like, I can't call anybody. The phones are jammed. And I was like, is there anybody you want to say, hi to? That tell them that you're okay. Maybe they're watching, because by that point we were simulcast on E1 and maybe E2. I don't know, but and the producers were like, how'd you? They were like, that's great, like, great job, like, because we're all just trying to like fill time as they're getting the next guest and figure out what's going on. And that was a really hectic show. I remember feeling very like, is this how it always is? Is this what happened? Because then I think Pat Summerall died later that week, and you realize like, oh, maybe there's always breaking news, and you just got to be ready to go off prompter. So,
Well, I'll let you go on a positive note here, Randy Scott.
yeah.
Have you been on the air or maybe right after the air doing SportsCenter after one of your teams won a championship?
No, but it's because I have bad teams, like I the Washington Capitals have broken my heart so much. And I had lost my voice the weeks leading, like in their Stanley Cup run. So I was not 17? On the air. It was 18. It was 18. So June of 18, I was like on, oh man, I was not doing shows. I just had no, like, there was no projection in my voice. And they'd said that I had a stomach acid issue. So that whole cup run, that whole summer, no fried food, no spicy food, no caffeine, no tomatoes, no alcohol.
Oh,
Things.
come on.
And then your team wins the cup and you're like celebrating with
Yeah.
green tea. Like, what are you supposed to do? But I
Yeah.
wrote a piece that they let me track about them winning and breaking the curse, and all the fans who, I kind of put my mom in it, like all the fans who had like rooted for this team for so long and maybe didn't get to see this, ultimate stage thing. So that was a cool thing to get to be a part of. But no, I haven't been able to like do a highlight of my team winning a championship. I did the highlight the next morning though, after they beat the Penguins that year in the second round,
Hmm.
and that was like, finally killing the bad guy. So that
Yeah.
was that was a good highlight read. But no,
I
I
got
haven't been able
to,
to.
by total chance, me and Amber Wilson were slated to fill in for Freddie and Harry doing the afternoons on the day of Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final, Panthers and Oilers. I'm a
Yeah,
massive Panther fan. And also the next day after Game 7. So, I mean, I was essentially doing, it was like a dream. Like, how am I doing a national show on ESPN? I'm doing like a Florida Panther pre-show, Game
yeah.
7. And then the next day, I get to bask in all the glory of them winning the Stanley Cup. It was ridiculous that I got to do that.
That's fantastic, dude. That's amazing. And Amber's the best. I mean, Amber's a
Yeah.
fellow Florida resident. She's a Gator though, right? She's not a
Yes.
Hurricane or anything.
I am
Okay.
too. We're both Gators. Yes.
Oh, there you go. All right.
Yeah.
Hey, if you guys are doing a show, if you guys are paired up here in a couple weeks, you might be doing a NCAA tournament men's final broadcast after your Gators
I
win.
hope so. I hope so. That would
Yeah.
be fun. Randy, excellent job. So again, 9 a.m. Disney Plus, but everyone can, it's on demand. You could stream it afterward and you get
Yeah.
SportsCenter Plus, Randy Scott and Gary Striewski. I got it right. Yes.
Yes, sir. Please do watch, stream, however you do it. We appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Randy. Good catching up with you.
Appreciate you, Zaz. Thanks, buddy.